In the comments on my last video, one viewer asked one of the smartest questions I have seen so far. Is China's economic future going to be a slow decline, or could we see a sudden, brutal political or economic collapse overnight? And is there any room for the Chinese regime to steady the ship after all this upheaval, which the viewer thinks started with Trump's tariffs? Excellent question. And I want to give you my full answer in this video because this is one of the most misunderstood dynamics in the entire China story today, right? What do we mean by China collapse? My big view in a nutshell, China's base case is a long, grinding, structural stagnation. But that path is full of hidden landmines, and any one of them could trigger a sudden, brutal shock. And while steadying the ship is theoretically possible, Xi's policies are making that outcome less and less likely every month. Let me take you through it. First, the base case, long structural stagnation. A lot of people, especially in the Western press, keep looking for the single big moment when China collapses overnight. That's not the most likely path. China is too big, too complex, too controlled for a simple Lehman Brothers style instant collapse. The most likely scenario is slow decay, a path we have seen before in other authoritarian systems. And let's be clear, I'm not talking about Japan here. Japan, despite its demographic challenges, remains a trusted, open, globally integrated economy with strong rule of law, world-class companies, and resilient institutions. China is nothing like that. China is heading towards something very different. And the right parallels are the Soviet Union in its final decade, Argentina through repeated stagflation and political instability, Turkey in recent years, rising authoritarianism, financial repression, currency instability. I saw this pattern firsthand when I worked with firms in emerging markets. I remember one project where we analyzed Argentina's slow collapse after its 2001 crisis. First came a stagnation, then capital controls, then desperate measures that only made things worse. China today is showing all the early signs of this trap. Let's look at the structural headwinds. Demographic collapse. China's working age population is shrinking fast, with a weaker safety net than Japan or Europe. Massive debt levels. The property sector is a giant bubble still in a process of deflating. Local governments are drowning in debt. And then the tech isolation. Western sanctions are cutting China off from critical chips and software. Capital flight. Foreign investors and wealthy Chinese are both trying to get out. State stranglehold on private businesses. Innovation is slowing. The entrepreneurial spirit is being crushed. This is a formula for long stagnation, rising inequality, decaying growth, and mounting frustration inside the system. And here's the thing. Stagnation breeds instability. Authoritarian regimes can manage slow decline for a while, but then the pressure builds, and eventually something gives. China today is sitting on multiple landmines, any one of which could trigger a fast, brutal crisis. Let's break them down. First, financial crisis. The property market is a slow motion implosion. Developers are still defaulting. Home buyers are losing confidence. In some cities, apartments are now being seen as the dead assets, the opposite of what they were for 20 years. If a major developer or shadow banking entity collapses and Beijing can't control the contagion, we could see a rapid financial panic. Second, capital flight and currency crisis. The yuan is under constant stress. I have spoken to friends inside Chinese financial circles, and they tell me the government is terrified of capital flight. If the Chinese yuan starts to slide too fast, Beijing faces a nightmare choice. Either defend the yuan and risk draining foreign exchange reserves, or let the yuan fall and risk sparking massive capital flight and loss of domestic confidence. In either case, the damage could be severe, and this could happen very fast if global markets lose trust. And let's not forget the political crisis. Xi Jinping looks strong on the surface, but internally, the CCP system is under growing strain. Youth unemployment is soaring. The middle class is growing angry about falling property values and shrinking opportunities. Elite dissatisfaction inside the system is rising. Many in the upper ranks resent Xi's endless centralization of power. In 1989, no one predicted the Tiananmen protests. In the Soviet Union, no one expected the sudden political unraveling of the late 1980s. When authoritarian systems stagnate, frustration builds below the surface until it suddenly explodes. And of course, the Taiwan miscalculation. This is perhaps the biggest single risk. If Xi feels cornered by internal pressures or by declining legitimacy, the temptation to create a Taiwan crisis could grow. But this would be a catastrophic mistake. It would trigger massive global sanctions. It would unleash energy disruptions that China is utterly unprepared for. It could trigger elite backlash if the CCP miscalculates. This is a scenario where a single bad decision could turn China's slow decline into a sudden economic and political collapse. Now, here's the second part of the viewer's question. Is there room for China to calm things down, regroup and stabilize? In theory, yes. In practice, Xi is closing that window fast. Let me tell you a story. A few years ago, I attended an event with several top economists, both Western and Chinese. And one very well-respected Chinese economist said this publicly. He said, if China embraces real reforms, opens to the world, and empowers its private sector, we can avoid stagnation. But privately, he told me, under Xi, that path is unlikely. We're moving toward more control, not less. And that's exactly what we see. Crackdowns on entrepreneurs, expansion of state-owned enterprises, aggressive propaganda, wolf warrior diplomacy. Even if the West wanted to stabilize relations, trust is broken. Global companies are moving out. Investors are diversifying away. Supply chains are decoupling. And inside China, the system is becoming more rigid, not more pragmatic. Xi is prioritizing political control over economic rationality. And that's the fatal mistake that led to the collapse of many past authoritarian regimes, from the Soviet Union to Argentina to Turkey. So, what happens next? Here's my view. The base case is long stagnation, like the Soviet Union in its final years, or modern Turkey or Argentina. Slow decay, but not a single instant collapse. But sudden shocks are very likely and will become more likely as stagnation breeds frustration and desperation. The chance to truly steady the ship is slipping away fast, and Xi's current path makes sudden crisis more probable, not less. History teaches us this pattern. The Soviet Union looked stable until it didn't. Argentina had slow decay, then sudden collapses. Turkey seemed to manage authoritarian stagnation, but now faces inflation and currency collapse. China is showing the same warning signs. We should expect a grinding decline, punctuated by crisis moments. possibly very dramatic ones in the next 3 to 5 years. And once those moments hit, it will be very hard, if not impossible, for the CCP to fully recover the global trust or economic dynamism. If you found this analysis useful, hit like and subscribe. This is the kind of big picture geopolitical truth the mainstream media often misses. And tell me in the comments, what do you think is the biggest risk China faces next? See you in the next video.